It might be a good time to get rolling. I think we've hit a good number, and it's in the interest of folks' time. You're welcome to continue posting a little bit about yourself as you enter into the chat. For those who don't know, my name is Vince Minjares, and I'm the development officer at Harvard Basketball. If you've been following our stuff, we've been doing quite a few posts on coaching, also player development, recruiting across the rep program. But today's a little bit different from some of the ones we've done so far. We really want to target that volunteer parent or coach, supporting folks who might be new to coaching or coaching very young players or coaching novice players, not necessarily coaching elite players or representative players. I mean, like most folks, I got my start, as a player in these environments, and definitely my dad was my coach growing up. So I'm very, very familiar with that space. Today, really, this is going to be Josh's day. So Josh Davis will be leading this presentation. I'm really here just to support him. But Josh is our in-schools coordinator, and together we do a lot of supportive coaches. I am broadly responsible for coach development, but Josh works very closely with schools and community coaches and primary and intermediate coaches. Spends a lot more time in that environment than I do. So really going to defer to him. He's been coaching at the North Cross intermediate for a while. He's an institution there, but he's also a coach in our program. So very much someone we like and respect. He's did a great job with our 15 boys this year. But this is going to be a broad kind of introduction. We'll hit on some core points, but really we want to hear from you in terms of the questions that you have, the topics that you would like to see addressed. I think that this is very much, we just want to make sure we touch on the issues that you've got. So while we do have some slides here, please be prepared with some questions, and we'll jump through. I think if we stay at this number, we can definitely take some verbal questions. So if you can just raise your hand, or you can always post them in the chat. So very totally fine for either at this point, given the size of the group. So with that, I will hand over to Josh. Josh, take it away.
Hey, Vince. Just first of all, I want to just thank all of you for jumping on board here. It obviously shows that you guys are really keen to help grow our game and help your communities and your schools and your kids out. You guys are often the most sort of overlooked people. We talk about, rec basketball and high school basketball and that kind of things. But as we'll talk about in the presentation, a lot of the players that get to those higher levels, they have people like you at the start of their journey, like Vince was talking about with his dad. My mum and my dad were my basketball coaches when I was younger as well. And with this is something that we're really trying to make a big push towards, is trying to help give you guys as many resources as we can. What we're going to go over, a lot of it is sort of theoretical stuff like coaching philosophy and things that we're trying to promote and encourage our kids. So we'll just go through that. If you have any questions, feel free to jump in. We are planning early next year to be having some in-person clinics. So our registration day early next year, we're going to be running some clinics so we can go into a bit more detail in terms of drills and that kind of thing. But so we'll just jump in. So just overall sort of coaching philosophy. So from my perspective, your goal as a coach overall is to help grow your players' love for the game. So you want to make sure that it's as enjoyable an experience as possible, and get them to want to keep playing the next year. So I know from my experience, when I first started coaching, I started coaching year 7, which is 11 and 12-year-olds, and I was all competitive and I wanted to win and all this thing. And as I've sort of grown more in the game and had more time coaching, I kind of understand now that it's more about just trying to plant those little seeds for the kids, give them good experiences, help them love the game, give them a curiosity about the game, encourage them to ask lots of questions about the game. And if we can plant those seeds, then as we go, we can make some special things happen. So yeah, obviously a big thing is to make it fun. So make sure every kid is enjoying themselves at trainings and games. Providing a positive experience is what leads to kids continuing to play. And a big thing that I'm big on and we're big on at Harbour is making sure our training environment is really fun, and it's something that our kids are excited to come to every day. Like, a lot of the time, I have memories when I was a kid of being giddy for the games and then kind of dreading trainings a little bit. But what we really want to do is try and make sure that our kids are really excited to come to training. They know they're going to get to play basketball. They're not just going to be running through drills and that kind of thing. So we want to make sure that the training environment is really fun and something they look forward to. Another thing, having realistic expectations. It's obviously not the NBA, so they're not going to be perfect. Embrace those imperfections, encourage them. As long as they're doing the right thing, they're trying to do the right thing. That's the main thing. Keep everyone engaged. That can be a mission, especially at the earlier age groups, but finding a way to engage everyone. If there's a kid who's a little bit behind everyone else, giving them high fives when they try and do the right thing, even if they don't pull it off, just making sure that we encourage them to keep trying. As when we get into our training plan, we want to try and make our drills short and sharp in training, just so that we're not sort of there too long explaining things, and that's when kids' minds start to wander about what's for dinner and that kind of thing. We want to try and keep it nice and quick, and that goes into making sure our instructions are nice and simple as well. Things to emphasize during training. So again, we want kids to make mistakes. So we're not training them to do things perfectly. We're not training them to pass to each other 10 times in a row without defense. We're trying to encourage them to try new things. So in game situations, we want them to try and find that open person. Maybe they try a no-look pass or something, whatever it is. We want them to try and develop new skills, and that comes through making mistakes. So encouraging them when they make a mistake, if they're trying to dribble with their weak hand, their left hand, or whatever it is, then encouraging them on that as well. And yeah, positive reinforcement on mistakes is really important.
John, I might just sort of make a comment on that, because I think it's very important that there's a tendency in coaching to think that the role of the coach is to kind of quote unquote teach them the game, which often translates to error correction. So coaches think that my first job is just correct mistakes, when in fact what we are learning about great coaching is really creating an environment where kids feel free to try, to experiment, to discover solutions. Doesn't mean you can't make suggestions or say things that help them, but what we know is the recipe for disaster is to regularly stop and correct, stop and correct, stop and correct, stop and correct. And this is the kind of thing that slows down the training. Kids aren't playing. Kids then get anxious about doing it right. And that whole sort of dynamic creates a tension that we don't want, particularly in young kids. We want them to enjoy play regardless of them making mistakes. And so I just want to make that point, because seen lots of youth coaches over the years jump right into error correct, error correct, error correct. And so as a coach, you got to become aware and conscious of what kind of feedback are you giving, both in games and in trainings. What are you saying to players while they're playing, and how often do you stop things to correct mistakes?
Yeah, that's really good, Vince. And that kind of ties into sort of encouraging our kids to embrace challenges as well. And we want to, again, obviously it's a bit of a corny, generic thing to say, but it's true. Like in coaching and in sport, we want our kids to be getting life lessons out of it. And so we want them to be trying to embrace challenges and see that as an exciting thing. It's a mountain to overcome. It's not a wall in their way. So, during skill work, if they're trying to do something or if they're just dribbling with their right hand every time, maybe you're encouraging them to try and dribble with their left hand or their weak hand. Trying to encourage them to try more left hand layups, weak hand layups, that kind of thing, just to try and install that it's an environment where we want to embrace challenges. It's an exciting thing. It's not something that gets us down, even if it doesn't work out. You know, in the long run, if we keep trying it, we can overcome it. And just giving, and this is a big thing as well, giving lots of praise as well to our kids, especially when they're trying something. Like, we don't want to be praising all the time the ball going in the hoop. We want to praise the good shot. They shot an open shot, awesome. Didn't go in, all good. Praise the decision and not the result.
Ironically, that's something we believe at even higher levels as well, but it translates to every level. You want players to focus on process, not outcome. So, did I do something that stretched me in some way, even if I didn't do it well? I might have, and I think, I don't know if you do this, Josh, but I know that when I think about young players who have an area that they can improve upon, or maybe are afraid to sort of do, like a left hand layup is a good example. It's often, I often like to, at the beginning of training, sit with a player and say, hey, you know what, today I want to see you try one left hand layup in a game, in a practice kind of activity game. I just want to see you try one. If you try one, then you've already improved, and like little kind of stretch goals like that can go a really, really long way as well towards individual confidence. Just try. I don't care if you.
Yeah, that's very important. And so just some sort of generic things that we can look to encourage during training. So in this, again, we've got a broad age range here, but these sort of apply at every level. Like, we're even talking rep level here. So eyes up when they're dribbling, so making sure that they're not staring down at the ball, making sure that they've got their eyes open, eyes up, looking for their teammates, looking for where the defense is. We want to encourage them finding the open person. That's a big thing, especially if you've got a sort of dominant player in your younger team. We don't want them to just be, the only skill they've acquired is just dribbling into 1,000 people trying to chuck up a shot. We want to encourage them to find the open person, so they've got that ability when they get to an older age and they have more comparative athletes that they're going against. So again, just finding the open person, it's a simple thing, but if we encourage that and we overpraise that, even lots of claps, lots of high fives for just finding the open person, that's a big thing. Spacing, that's another thing at all age groups, and from the younger ones through, making sure that we're not clumped together, we're spread out, we're stretching the defense, and we're taking open shots. That's another thing that applies at every level. We don't want to be taking shots with two people all over us with their hands in our face. We don't really typically want to be shooting even with one person with their hands in our face. We want to be trying to find that open person at all times. And we want to be encouraging them to mark a play and match up with someone on defense. So the moment they switch to defense, we want them to be able to identify who they've got, call out their number or point them out, and to stay between the player you're defending and the hoop that you're defending. So that's the first key of defense, really, is to make sure that you're not giving the offense an easy chance to get to the hoop. And this is something that Vince will be able to speak on. This is something that we've really focused on a lot at Harbour since he's come on board, and we've seen a lot of really good results from this, is making sure our kids are learning through play. So making sure that our training isn't just sort of one versus no one skill drills. Like, there's obviously a space for working on our skills without defense or opponents, but a lot of what we want to do is to give the kids a chance to learn through little mini games, if it's 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, so on and so forth. Obviously we want to do this because it's fun for the kids. They want to play, that helps make training something that they're looking forward to. I even know, with our older rep kids, under 23s, when they know that they're coming into a training where they're going to get to play a lot, there's a spring in their step, they're excited, and these are 23-year-olds that we're talking about. So when we're talking about the younger kids, if they know they're going to get to play at training, that's when they're more excited and our environment's nice and high. And then also playing those mini games that prepares the kids for the actual games. They have defense to contend with. They have different movement from their teammates to deal with and analyze and process. And, and Vince can speak more to this.
Yeah. I'm just going to, I've just posted into the group chat a link to the video database for Brian McCormick. And some of you may have seen that a couple of weeks ago, we did a call with Brian. Now, most of our conversation with Brian last time was a conversation about kind of junior elite teams. But the cool thing about Brian is that he works with every age group. He works with professional all the way down to entry level youth. And he's got mixed in with his videos of some of his older teams are a lot of videos with some of his younger teams. And Brian does a lot of small-sided games. And some of you who may be familiar with that term, it's an academic term, it's a coaching theory term, but basically what the research has taught us is that playing in games, small-sided or modified versions of the game, are better teachers of decision-making than drills without defense. So if you do drills 1-on-0, 2-on-0, 3-on-0, they'll get good at the drill and they might improve a very isolated technique. It doesn't mean we completely eliminate drills, but learning how to read the game and play the game improves your ability to read the game and play the game, or spending time reading and playing the game improves your ability to read and play the game while also being fun. And so I think this is a win-win on multiple levels. And so Brian just got a number of really, really good games here that really showcase that, because if you can structure your training in such a way where kids are rolling through versions of game after game after game, and you've designed it. Now, there is an art to coaching here where you've got to design the game. You've got to design the game in such a way that promotes a challenge that is appropriate for the skill level. And that might mean playing a version of 2-on-2 or 1-on-1 or 3-on-3 with a specific rule modification. So what do I mean by a rule modification? I want to make rules that create a fun and interesting challenge for the kids. And so we've got lots of versions. You could just start with simple 3-on-3. And then for example, something like pass 3 times before shooting. We would often, I'm a big fan of starting with scoring rules. So you can only score in certain ways. So you can only score by shooting in these areas of the court, for example. So we often like to overvalue uncontested layups. So if you make an uncontested layup, we give you more points than a contested layup or a jump shot. And that would, of course, encourage players to try to seek out closer shots and layups, which is what Josh has alluded to already. So that you want to build in designs and really through rules. The rules, what we talk about in coaching now is that the game is the teacher and the rules are your primary teaching tool. The rules of the game are your primary teaching tool. We commonly will do rules around how you start, how you finish, points for scoring system, size of the court. You think about time. So for example, play 3-on-3, but you only have 6 seconds to score. Coach is counting down on go, and then suddenly you're playing a game where you've only got 6 seconds to score. And if you don't score or you don't shoot, automatic turnover. So that mimics the pace of the game. Basketball is a fast-paced game. We want kids to make quick decisions. So, usually the combination, that's a combination I'm a big fan of, is a shorter shot clock and a scoring system. Boom, that gets you going right away. Fast-paced game, looking for good shots. They don't even know they're doing it. They're just playing a game. So, yeah, tons of really good rules out there if you're interested.
Yeah, that's an awesome resource, Vince. And again, early next year, once we're out on the court, we can sort of show examples of those games and to use in training as well, which will be really fun.
I'll post a few more links into the group chat as well, just of places like YouTube pages that have good games.
Awesome. So this is just a little sort of example of a training plan. So obviously there will be times where maybe you do have time to plan your training out in detail. There will be times where you're rushing from work, or you're had to get the kids up early for school and that kind of thing, where you don't always have the time. But this is sort of a good little template to use, and this could be various age groups, probably a bit more primary school than anything else. But we want to work on some skill work at the start, just get them warmed up with a few things, and then work on some skill work with defense, with teammates, and then get into more at the end of the training, last 20 minutes or so. We want to be really making sure that we're getting 3-on-3, 4-on-4, and then ending with a 5-on-5 game. Now, for those of you coaching younger kids, I know that having to sort of control behavior and that kind of thing can be a real issue. I've coached literally year 1 through year 13, so I can sympathize with that. The game at the end is always a good carrot to have. So if the making sure that their behavior can be a little bit moderated by the fact they know that you can take the 5-on-5 game away if the behavior isn't perfect. You don't want to be going to that card too often, but it's something that can be quite handy just when you're trying to control some rowdy kids. Anyone have any questions, Vince, in the chat about training or anything?
Now would be a really good time to just kind of stop and pause. What questions do you have about kind of training? Anything. We've talked a lot about kind of activities and some of the learning goals and the broader goals, but I'm sure there's going to be some specific issues that you come across or are interested. Maybe you work with coaches that come up, that issues that they come up with often. So we're keen to hear from you. Any questions that you might have right now specifically about that side of things.
Hey guys, it's Adam. I hope you can hear me. Is that all right? Hey Vince.
Yeah,
hey Josh.
Yeah.
Good stuff so far. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the variety I think is important. So I definitely can do enough research on the internet and find different drills. So I've just been training a year 6 team, but now I'm going to be going back to a year 3 team, or year 4 team, sorry. So resources like you're going to post would be awesome to make it. You're absolutely right. Is the bribe in the game at the end is always a good one. If you want to do this cool stuff, you're going to have to put a little bit of work in at the beginning. But the mixing up of training is definitely something that over like a 10-week period is obviously quite hard to keep fresh, rather than having to go back to some of the things that they did enjoy, that were really exciting at the beginning, and it's like, oh, we're doing this again, it's a bit boring, but it's like the 3rd time in 10 weeks. So that kind of variety of support would be amazing.
Yeah, I would say variety is one of the most important foundations of coaching effectiveness. Kids get bored. And kids get really bored doing the same thing over and over again, especially if it's like a drill, like a kind of a redundant drill with the same thing over and over again. And I know that's a bit of a traditional coaching approach, and it's worked in some spaces in the past, but kids are different these days. Their attention can go quickly, and you want to keep it engaging. So a couple of things I'll just add in there, I think, that are important. One is, when you do whatever you do, make sure that kids are not standing and watching on the sideline for too long. So one of my biggest pet peeves in watching coaches is attending a training and seeing kids standing and watching and not engaged while a coach works with 1 player on the court or 2 players on the court. So there's a need to engage the game in ways that engage them with usually through your rotations. So you need to think about your rotations. What's the rotation? What's the rule for changing and bringing new players onto the court? And that's where there's a need to make sure that you have built that into the game's design when you introduce it. So I would never introduce a game without introducing how rotations work. So for an older, more skilled player team, it might be winner stays on. If you score, you stay on offense, new group comes on, and often they're in lines, and the next first person in line comes on next. But for a lower level team, I might just say, once that possession's over, new team comes in. And so that might be an easier way to do it. Couple of questions in there for you, Josh. How about this one? For younger kids that have different skill levels, how would you suggest to structure training? It's a good question.
That is a very good question. That can really be sort of a problem to contend with at every coaching level. The big thing that I found in my early coaching was you want to make sure that you're coaching up everyone. You're making sure everyone is striving to maximize their specific talent. So if there's a kid who's amazing, you don't want them sort of being brought kind of to the sort of the mean of everyone else. You want to try and, so whether that's you take them to the side and you have to dribble with your left hand this entire 5-on-5 we're doing, or introducing different things like that, different challenges for that player. On the other end of the spectrum, if they're a bit behind everyone else, just giving them real simple sort of tasks or things to focus on, making sure that they match up with the player. If they've done that, that's success. If they're on offense, they've spaced well, they catch the ball when it's thrown to them, they find the open person, that's success. So a big thing I think is, and it's one of the hardest parts of coaching, is trying to find the best way to maximize every single person and every single kid, and that can be tough, and it takes time, but thinking about that kind of thing and thinking what can challenge every player, that is a big thing that goes towards helping with that, I think.
I would add a couple things, and I'm seeing a similar theme across a few of these questions. So one thing I would say is this is why it's really important to not just do 5-on-5 for an entire training, small-sided games, particularly 1-on-1s or 2-on-2s, where you can maybe pair players of similar levels. Ideally, I mean, obviously we don't know the exact context of the situation, but can you pair players of similar age and stage or size and age kind of thing together, and they can compete against each other? So it's like a little bit of like versus like. So that's one option. So 1-on-1s are really good for that. That can be a fun way to do it. Some version of a game where people can compete against someone of the same size. That's also key in, let's say, for example, 3-on-3. We are big fans of distributing size across teams. So we will often do a lineup shortest to tallest, set them up into teams, and then have the teams kind of compete against each other. But when you do it that way, you number them, you go sort of like tallest on this end, shortest on this end. Well, and then you start 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So there's a fair distribution of height and size across the team, which tends to usually correspond to skill level. So if you do it that way, then each team has a fairly similar level of ability. And you can kind of know if you need to kind of adjust and, all right, this team's probably too strong, you might need to switch these teams out. You wouldn't say that to them, but you'd kind of comment on that. That's another thing that you can do. And then the other thing I would say is maybe, especially early in a training, doing some kind of an activity or skill challenge that's entirely self-paced. So it might be a game, it might be a thing where they're tracking how many layups they made or attempted or something where they can keep score, but they're not trying to beat someone else. They're just trying to do their best in that particular thing. And so often what I will do in that situation is I won't want them to announce their score to everyone. They might announce it to each other, but I just want to go, hey, what'd you get on that? Okay, next time get one better. And so what we're doing is I want you to focus on your own self-improvement. I don't want you to worry about what other people are doing, and I think that's another kind of instance of a way to kind of make it about you and not about comparison, because comparison is really the piece that creates the self-doubt and the lower self-esteem. I'm not as good as others. Well, we don't want you to worry about others. We just want you to worry about getting better yourself relative to your current level of game. And that tends to be effective across all age levels, because the same phenomenon works for elite players too. You get into a team environment, there's always going to be someone who's strongest and someone who's weakest. Same psychology still applies. Any other last one? I guess, Josh, what about a player who's not sure when it comes to, how do you get kids that are not too sure when it comes to doing these to participate and stay engaged without getting bored or doesn't want to join it? What about a kid who's really like, doesn't really want to do it, like really hesitant, really unsure, maybe not there for the same reasons as everybody else?
Yeah, I mean, that can be a tough one. Sort of how I've countered that in the past is, you have to be really specific about how you try and engage them. So everyone's doing a drill, maybe you're having a chat with them about how they're doing, how they're feeling, about what we're doing. You're giving them maybe some more instruction, just not in front of everyone, but just while the drill's going on, you can help them out in that kind of way. And something else that works is, I think with pretty much every group I've ever coached, there's always that one sort of special kid who every other player looks towards and sort of respects, and is just a bit more mature than everyone else. And I think getting that kid to sort of help out with someone who's not as engaged is a really good tool, because ultimately and we see this at higher levels as well, like kids want the respect of their peers. And if we have one of those kids who has leadership skills, we want them to obviously to help further their leadership skills from their perspective, and then it can also help bring in that other person who maybe is a little bit unsure of what they're doing or is a little bit less engaged.
Yeah, I think this relates, to the question that Don has now just raised as well, because I think that enlisting the support of your team to help welcome and make a player feel accepted, even though they're maybe not as skilled, is a really important tactic. So that also is part of lay the ground rules at the beginning of your team season. Very, very beginning, start of first practice, lay the ground rules for how we're going to treat each other. And I think that, establishing kind of code of conduct, not too many rules, just basic things. Hey, we are going to treat each other this way. We will not have any tolerance for these things. And they need to be common sense, no brainers, right? It's going to be like, like, for example, I have no tolerance for kids engaging in like I would say the thing that keeps coming to me is I remember a kid at a trial throwing a ball at another kid's head. Like, and I know it's kind of a crazy one, right? But it's like, that was something I had no tolerance for. And it really was inappropriate behavior for a team environment. And so that could be foul language, that could be, bullying another person, that could be, just embarrassing someone. We will not stand for it. We are going to treat each other with respect. I don't care how skilled you are. I don't care where you are in this. This is our standard, and we're going to hold everyone to that, and then enforcing that. And I think that this is where we have to remember that sport is not just about play. It's not just about winning or losing and skill development. It's also a youth development vehicle. And so one of the things that parents rely on sport to do is they rely on teachers to establish standards of behavior. That helps kids learn those things. So it doesn't mean you need to be militant about everything. It means draw your lines in the sand, make them common sense, make sure they're things that you can enforce easily, and that build the kind of environment that you want. And I think that, you'll certainly find where those things are. If you have a player who is ultimately not following those things, then you move to the next tack, which is one-on-one conversation on the side. And if they continue, then it's one-on-one conversation with the parent. And if they continue, then it's, okay, we need to really evaluate whether or not you're the right person you should stay on this team because you're not following our team's standards. And so again, if you've articulated that not just to the players, but to the parents in an email before the start of the year, that also reinforces it from the parent side.
Yeah, I think just to chime in, Vince, I think that's the thing at any young age, that's the thing we need to have the highest standards for, is how the kids treat each other and relate to each other. Zico Coronel, who's a very elite coach in New Zealand, he has a saying, what you permit, you promote. So if you see a little bit of their kid making comments to another kid, or if you'll just sort of let that slide because the kid's good, or there's too much going on and you feel like you can't deal with it, if you sort of let that slide, then that's letting that slip into your team culture. And so I think it's really important that you nip that stuff in the bud really early. From my experience, those kind of kids tend to be the more talented kids. So it's typically about trying to empower them as leaders to share their knowledge, to not talk down on other people who don't know what they know or can't do what they do. Those kids can be, you need to sort of make that a challenge for them to help themselves get better and find a different skill set, life skill set. And then that sort of helps make sure everyone, again, wants to come to training. It's a fun environment for them. It's a safe space where they can come and have fun, get better, and they're not going to be feeling like they're judged by other people.
I'd add one more thing and then we can move on, I think, from this, but it might also be a good idea to build in some camaraderie rituals. So build some rituals into your training environment. So without having to resort to these kind of reactive steps, what we really want to do is be proactive on this. So proactive, team building rituals, like you want to create a positive environment. So, these little things go a long way. Like for instance, you bring the group together to chat very briefly about that game that was just played. You might ask them a couple of questions. Hey, what'd you guys think of that game? What'd you learn? Why do you think we played that game? So on and so forth. And then you might say something like, hey, everyone, I want everyone to clap it up for Johnny. Johnny did a great job of X. And you might identify a player who just needs that little boost. Well, now you've just catalyzed positive energy toward a young kid who needs something by just making it a ritual. And you might do that 2 or 3 times in practice. Hey, I want to recognize Tom or Gemma for doing X behavior. Let's clap it up for them. Great job. And then, then we bring it in and it's like, Gemma on 3, 1, 2, 3, Gemma, something like that. Like those little things go so far for kids, so build those positive rituals into your team environment. Okay. No zone. we do not preach zone in youth basketball. So, and zone's not legal for us in New Zealand below the age of 15s. So we are definitely a man-to-man community. What do you think about roles though, Josh? Roles and positions for players?
Yeah, like we talk a lot, and since you've come in, Vince, we've talked a lot about positionless basketball. So that means, I think, especially at a really early age, we want to be encouraging every kid to have every skill set. So we don't want to be sticking the tall kid under the hoop just because they're the tall kid and that'll help us win basketball games. We want the tall kid to be dribbling the ball up the court. My under 15 rep team this year had a 15-year-old who was 6'11" when we were at nationals, and he was often getting defensive rebounds, dribbling up the court, spacing on the perimeter, attacking from the perimeter. We could have just stuck him under the hoop the entire tournament and won by 50, but for his sort of long-term development, it's better for him to learn every skill, and that's something we really want at those early age groups, because you never know how big a kid's going to be. You don't know if they've just grown early, you don't know if they're going to grow late. So we want to really emphasize 5-out spacing, particularly everyone being able to dribble, everyone being able to shoot, pass, defend every position, every size, that kind of thing. So especially at an early age, we're really big on just positionless, learning every sort of facet of the game, which is really important.
Yeah, we know that kids will naturally sort themselves into roles. And so what we have to do is be careful of unintentionally reinforcing those sort of sorting of roles that they do naturally. So some kid might all automatically believe that they're the best ball handler, they're going to bring the ball up every time, and kids start deferring. And so actually what we find is that it's good for coaches to sometimes consciously shift that. So encourage multiple players to bring the ball up, or assign that player to not bring the ball up in some cases, because that player gets the majority of the touches. And as we know, young players tend not to pass very much. So the same player brings it up every time. The same player might shoot every time. That's not team basketball. So what we want to be, and that carries into multiple age groups and levels. So, I think that for the sake of growth of the team, we need multiple touches every possession. Multiple players can bring the ball up. You may or may not, you may have a few players who really are not skilled enough to do that. So especially earlier in the year, that might be more of a, hey, our goal is to get to a point where you are able to bring the ball up, and they might be too scared to bring it up initially. So that might be an issue. But we are definitely big believers in skill variety, not narrowly putting kids into boxes. Some of it may happen, but certainly don't want coach imposed strict position specialization. We discourage that. I think we can move on.
All right, so just thinking about in-game coaching now. So these are just some things that we think are pretty important at these young age groups. Even court time, I know this can be a tough one for us coaches because we like winning, but especially at these younger age groups, it's really important that we're sharing our court time around, making sure everyone has a chance to contribute, making sure everyone feels like a valuable part of the team, and even court time is a really big part of that. So that's something that we think is really important. And again, this is something that we've touched on earlier, but making sure that we're process focused, not results focused. So a kid has a wide open shot that's within his range and he shoots it well, he's wide open, but he misses it. We want to encourage that. So what I tend to do, and this has become a big thing only recently in professional basketball, is making sure that when we shoot an open shot, we're not waiting for the ball, if it goes in or not, to clap. As soon as my player open shot, they shoot it, I'm clapping before the ball gets to the rim. And that gives them the knowledge that they've made that right decision. That empowers them that whenever they're open, they're going to shoot the ball with confidence, and they know they've done the right thing. And again, sometimes I see at the younger age groups, coaches being annoyed because they've missed a layup. If the layup's open and they've taken a good open layup, which is a really high percentage shot at every level, sometimes the ball doesn't go on the hoop. And so we just need to make sure that we're focused on the process and not the results.
I would say a couple of things about that. You said earlier kind of a similar comment. I know one of my youth coaches used to say that you are what you emphasize, and your emphasis comes primarily through your praise and your condemnation. So what you praise is what you emphasize and encourage. What you condemn is what you discourage. So part of what we want to see happen is the elimination of the condemning players for outcome mistakes, right? Like, I didn't make the shot. We want to eliminate that criticism of, oh, you got to make that. Don't do that. What we want is the praise of the shot decision, because then they'll try it again the next time. And interestingly, there's a concept I've used for years. It's called I call it like a rehearsal or a verbal instant replay, where on a timeout, you bring the players in. Hey, I just want to review what just happened right there. That was amazing. Johnny brought it up, saw, Tom in the corner, passed it to Tom. Tom drove, kicked out to Johnny again. Johnny then drove and passed it to, and then it's like, you're verbally articulating the decisions that were made in a really positive, encouraging voice. You're emphasizing teamwork, decision-making, passing, great basketball. That's awesome. And so that is a really effective way to just reinforce the kind of behaviors you want to see. And that's fun, because then kids are getting praised. And interestingly, I've seen some research on what kids find fun, and there's a whole piece of research from this lady named Amanda Visek, and she ranked 81 items that kids 81 distinct items that were recognized as fun. And number one most fun thing about sports was coaches' praise. So just let that sink in for a second, how important your praise is to the experience of players. Now it needs to stay meaningful. It can't be like false praise. You want to praise things that genuinely are good and that reinforce the behaviors, but your praise really matters.
Yeah, and yeah, every team I've coached where that's been a massive emphasis and we've praised unselfishness and teamwork, that becomes a thing that the players on the bench are then celebrating unselfish basketball, and it just becomes a thing that permeates the whole team. So that's really important. Another thing is offering prompts or cues, verbal cues to the players, instead of sort of directing them and instructing them, or video game controlling them, as I like to call it. So offering verbal cues, spacing, so they remember to space out, spread out from one another, eyes up, match up, that kind of thing, instead of sort of saying, we all see, for the most part, things that the kids can't quite see yet, but it's about not screaming at them to pass the Jimmy. It's about eyes up, so that then they're empowered to make that decision themselves, and it's not coming directly from us. Obviously, I'm seeing Jimmy open, so I've reminded my player to get their eyes up, and then they are going to make that decision that I've essentially prompted them into making, but that's actually helping their decision making. That's actually making a difference to them. And again, it goes back to making sure that each and every one of your players has a good experience each game. Now that's not always possible, because kids get really caught up in the result quite often, or they get really caught up in they're missing shots or whatever it is. It's about making sure, again, that you're emphasizing the right thing. There's a video a few years ago of LeBron James at one of his son's basketball games. This kid was quite dejected because he'd missed lots of his shots down the stretch of a game, but LeBron, when he was talking to him, pointed out every pass that he had made to get someone open, every defensive play that he had made that made a difference, every rebound. And that was a really good example of making sure that we open kids' minds up to what is actually important and what contributions they're making. It's not all about scoring, the ball going in the hoop. Sure, you made a couple of turnovers, but you forced the other team into turnovers with your defense, with your effort. So making sure that, and we can all tell often, like, which players are a little bit dejected or a little bit down, making sure that before they get out of the gym, put an arm around their shoulder, have one of those chats with them, and that can really help.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, do we have any questions about some of the in-game stuff?
Is everyone okay on the process of substitution, which I know, is a question. We got a question from Donna. What are your thoughts on giving a child a player of the day a number of times because they worked for it, or should we give it to every child because they're part of the team so parents can see we are being fair to each player? Do you guys do a player of the day, Josh? Have you in some of your junior teams, or?
I think we used to, because Harvey used to give out a Burger King voucher or something for player of the day. I think from memory, we tended to rotate it. But from my general perspective on that would be to try and even that out. And there are kids who are dominating the game that know they're good and probably don't need the praise or reinforcement as much as the kid who didn't score a point but played hard on defense and contributed in other ways. So my kind of inclination is to try and spread that out as much as you can. Again, make sure every player is feeling like they're making valuable contributions to the team and they're having positive experiences would be my lean on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. this might be a bit controversial, but I've never really been particularly big on player of the day. I do think that verbal acknowledgement, like even privately, it can sometimes be more help, like more meaningful. Just, hey, like, and just pulling a player aside, hey, you were awesome today. Like, loved what you did. Great energy, great enthusiasm. You tried new stuff. Like, I'm so proud of you. Like, I would actually argue that that is more valuable than necessarily a thing you hand to them afterwards. I do, however, think that team-wide kind of small scale incentives can sometimes be valuable. So, for example, could you get a Burger King certificate for every player and surprise them with it on a day when you really thought that they had a really good group session collectively? And so then it's like everyone's trying to lift their standard of, for example, it might be something that's more based on attitude or effort or teamwork. I think that kind of lifts a collectiveness. I think part of what we have to be conscious of is too much. We don't want to turn play into I'm pursuing that award versus that's an extrinsic reward. We want intrinsic reward. So I think that, yeah, that's just my personal opinion. I know that there are folks who've done it and maybe really like it. Some kids really value it. I've just personally found that I don't necessarily need it from a motivation perspective, but personal decision. Everybody kind of has their own little thing. Yeah, anything else? Any questions around substitutions? Because I know that can often be a piece of kind of thorniness around how do you sub, and do you really do just like equal? Are you purely equal? Are you kind of using a formula, or are you kind of just winging it and rough estimation around how much everyone's played? I think that I've probably always been a little bit more of a try to keep a running catalog of how long each player has been out there and really try to make sure that the distribution of time is even, particularly for those younger teams. All right, cool. I think you can probably move on, Josh.
All right, that's about all I have.
Okay. Cool.
Yep. So if we don't have
any other questions or comments, anything that anybody wants to share or topics they'd love to see. I'm also interested in if there are any topics that you'd love for us to address or support in future sessions. There might be some element of technical, tactical, teaching layups. I know that's a big one. Anything like that. Cool. I think that's pretty good then. An hour.
Yeah, so yeah, again, from my perspective, yeah, thanks to everyone who's sort of jumped on with us, because you don't have to do this. It's in your free time right now, and we're not even in season, so it's really shown how much you guys care about helping kids and helping your community. And like I said, this is something that I'm really, in my role, trying to step up on, making sure that there are resources, there are, lots of videos, lots of different mini games and drills and stuff that you guys have access to, and that's something that we're working on. So yeah, really, really appreciate you guys jumping on board, and we look forward to seeing you guys in the new year.
I've just posted a link to a site called Hoops Europe, and one of the things that they have are game archives. So they've got these manuals of small-sided games that you can play. And this guy basically went to the Spanish club in in Europe and studied them for like a year and just found, like, just documented everything he saw. The thing I like about it is he goes from under 10s all the way up to under 16s, and he does skill development, team development, offense, defense, and he's got lots of really fun games in there. And even if you don't do the game exactly the way he's outlined it, it'll just generate some ideas for game design. You know, there's games around, like, you know, beating a player to the gates with cones, and there's lots of little rules that are built into some of their games that are really, really, really good. So I'm a big fan of Hoops Europe, big fan of Brian McCormick. You know, I think there's a number of people online that are also good to follow. If you haven't already, it's also probably a good idea to think to think about warm up and healthy warm up. So I know we didn't address that a lot, but you know, very important that you spend 5 minutes getting the body warm before you go directly into basketball stuff. So the ACC Sports Smart Warm Up is a framework that can be adapted to younger kids. You don't need to do it that extensively, but it is a tool to get you thinking about some of the things, some of the kinds of movements we want kids to do. I think, and when we send out the video for this, I think we'll include a few links that I think are important. But yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to us and ask any questions. I'll just post my email in the chat.
Yeah, and I'll email everyone with the link to this and some resources and everything. And yeah, always open to having people ask questions and bits of advice, because I know, you know, me and Vince are always scrolling the internet trying to find drills and little ideas to steal from other coaches. So we're right there with you, and any help that we can provide, we're happy.
And if you're ever interested in observing some Harbor rep trainings, even an under 15, for example, you'll see a lot of these concepts maybe with a slightly more skilled player. But it's the same framework that we're introducing to you. So just adapted. So, you know, happy for people to come do that, and happy to run another one of these if you think that it would be valuable for some of your colleagues or peers. So cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right. Appreciate it.